Hello, everyone, and welcome to our World Today, the Unionist Perspective. We're very happy to be with you this week, and we'll talk about politics. We're talking a lot about politics, but we're basically in the year where we were foreshadowing that we will be talking about a lot of elections, because there are a lot of general and presidential elections happening in a lot of countries. And one election was kind of added to the mix in the past few weeks, one that we talked about a little bit um, last week. And basically, it was the French Parliament election, um, where people were kind of scared that the far-right movements would be elected to power. Um, and election which ended up with the win of, I guess, the left coalition of parties, with like almost 200 seats, but very close behind the party of the president, which is kind of center-right for most people. And 120 seats for far-right movements, which is still a high score, higher than they've ever had in the Republic, but they still lost. And that's, I guess, a good outcome in terms of trying to preserve the stability of a country, since so much of their programs were based on uprooting just about anything that wasn't for people that looked French. So that's what we're going to start the discussion with, and then we're going to talk about the results of the parliament elections in the UK as well. And and yeah, if we have time, we're going to talk about the elections in Canada. So yeah, as I said, a lot of elections today. And I just want to open the floor to my teammates, because I'm curious to know like how they've been feeling about the French election, and obviously what we talked about with the rise of the far-right movements and the results that are happening, or if you guys have any questions for me that you would like answered or detailed. Open floor.
Yeah, I would love to know more details on the UK election.
Mhm.
Have any on how the public is feeling about this and um, any other updates that are coming out after the election.
So for the UK election, basically the the Tories, who are the left, no, the right wing politicians of the UK, um, who have been in power since, I don't know how many years actually, probably since before Brexit. If Sage has like a few
I
insights.
think like 14 years.
14 years, yeah. Yeah, so basically, way before Brexit, I think they had a brief moment in power in the beginning of the 2010s, and people weren't necessarily happy with the status quo of things, and I think the law about Brexit kind of accelerated the presence in power of a right-winged politician, and it's been basically 10 years of being in this energy of wanting to basically isolate from the rest of the European Union, which was something that was kind of weird for most people. They had mixed feelings about it, and basically because there wasn't a lot of participation in the elections, because people didn't necessarily understand like how much it would affect them, Brexit was voted. And And then like a lot of people do like Brexit, and a lot of people from the left and right wings actually in politics are kind of surprised that Brexit wasn't just like removing the European Union from any official papers of the UK, but it was actually going out of the European Union, so not benefiting of the taxes, of the agriculture funds, the fishing funds, any of the advantages of Europe, basically, that they already had. And the only thing that was really weird for the UK was the use of the euro currency, but they already didn't have the euro currency anyway. So a lot of people are still kind of bewildered by the chaos that Brexit basically created in their everyday life, and they're still adapting to that right now, which sparked in the past few years a lot of demonstrations and a lot of protests and a lot of instability. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you were already in the discussion, Nadia, when we talked about that, but there was a moment where they changed prime ministers 5 times in a few months. And I'm guessing that the general elections that happen right now were basically kind of people were kind of fatigued with what happened with the Tories, and they wanted change, but instead of seeking change in parties of extreme groups for now, they just wanted to say like, all right, let's see in this new context, post-COVID, it's a very new situation, post-Brexit, we've never had this situation before. Let's see how the left wings, the Labour Party, is faring. And I'm not certain how many of the citizens feel about it, but I've heard before the elections that they very much wanted to have this change established for them. And so I'm guessing that at least part of the population is kind of relieved to see that there's going to be a fair amount of change, of energy, of work being done just by their new choice. So I hope that this clarifies the situation for the UK. Yeah, do you have any like other questions about it, or did I miss anything for other people? Maybe you're more informed about it than I am.
No, that feels very sufficient. Thank you for that information. It cleared up.
So I think the other thing that was surprising was that it's been termed a surprise election because it happened earlier than should have been scheduled, than it should have happened, and it was preceded by a request of the current Prime Minister to dissolve the Parliament. So there's almost a sentiment that, and because I have a friend living in the UK, it's almost like they have the sentiment that this whole election was actually just handed to the Labour Party because of the significant dissatisfaction with the Conservative Party. And a lot of people saying the policies have literally stopped growth for the UK because life has become so much more tumultuous over the last few years with economics and politics and just, I mean, there's been a lot of things around. And I remember there was something about even just the government kind of getting more involved in people's lives with that kind of social, almost social experiment of getting people to friend other people as a wellness thing. So they just felt like the government was getting too involved in their lives, and they literally wanted a change, and the change was literally to swing to the left. And I think, it's kind of the sentiment of the greater majority of the population that they wanted something else. And so they were going to go where that something else was.
So basically, what you're saying is that the Prime Minister dissolves Parliament exactly like um, Emmanuel Macron dissolved Parliament in France. That's
Yeah, from what I understand is that a conversation took place with the King of England, and it was approved that the Parliament could be dissolved.
wow, wow. And
And
why?
that's why the election was held earlier than it should have been.
Why? But why would Rishi Sunak ever do that? Knowing that it may endanger in quotation marks is majority in parliament is what I wonder.
It's interesting. It's interesting that it almost feels like he was following the sentiment of people saying, I'm giving you what you want, but I'm going to fight for your vote, except they lost the fight. So the fight didn't end in their favor.
Mm-hmm. All right. It's true that I don't know. It's kind of surprising. I've always felt like even in the midst of the worst chaos possible, UK Prime Ministers still most of the time respected people's choices. So maybe it felt like it was the right time to just have new elections. Maybe it's part of I don't know. Maybe it's part of a strategy as well because like in the past, I know some people have the rhetoric of all right, we're leaving Labor with the power in hands, and when they mess it up, like we'll come back stronger, which is a little bit weird. But I know that uh, a lot of what happened in politics at the moment could be like strategizing for power, so it may involve that as well. So yeah,
But yeah, I mean, also, but just the Labour Party is obviously backed more significantly by the working class.
mhm,
And the working class was looking for change because life has become significantly different for them. And so, with the party coming in, they are hoping for more labor friendly and also more cost of or standard of living friendly policies from government.
right, yeah.
And I'm sharing a very rudimentary understanding of it. So if anybody has additional information that they'd like to share with us in the chat that we can share with everybody, please feel free.
I had a question actually about this. So in this case, basically, both in the UK and in France, the respective leaders of the current ruling party or coalition or whatever they had was like, hey, we're gonna have an election early. So there that looks really interesting because in the US that never happens. Like you can't have an election early unless well, no, yeah, you can't because even if the president were to leave or or die or anything, there's a line of succession that goes down 20 plus people all the way down to the Secretary of Agriculture or something. So they come up like that thing at the grocery store where it pushes items to the front when you take the front item out, and there's always someone. So I was wondering in France and in the UK, was this a case of preserving, was it a case of kind of damage control where the ruling party was hey, if people really don't like what we're doing. We're just gonna get out as fast as we can so that we avoid creating further resentment toward us? Or was it more of like a noble thing? Like, it's like, you know what? Our purpose isn't just to stay in power, our purpose is to serve people. So because of that, we're going to step back and we're going to see if maybe people want different leaders, you know, because that, to me, that sounds really nice, because that's a big problem we all have in the world, where leaders just want to stay in power, but they don't really care about, like, oh, what's actually, you know, best for everybody. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it would never happen in the US because it's a presidential system. And we kind of forget that because obviously, like, the head of state, like, they have a lot of power. The president has a lot of power in France, but it's still a parliament system. So basically, you gotta respect the majority of parliament more than you gotta respect the majority of the president, or the vote of confidence from people to the president. And in France, it was definitely not an altruistic kind of move on Macron's part. It was basically the European elections, the far right movements, they won it, and I want to preserve my power. Usually I just say, like, hey, he's a pretty stable president, but like everybody, I think, on earth right now in a position of power, I think he wants to preserve it. And he doesn't want to roll with the left-wing parties because there are some people that are kind of erratic, or that he considers as erratic in the left-wing parties. And he was just like, this is a situation of crisis and we must interfere um, before it gets worse. He almost lost it because the first round of results put the far right, extreme far right movements as the winner, and with overwhelming majority of seats. And I think people there was like a high level of participation, the highest level of participation of the past 50 years in any kind of elections. And basically that prevented them from having majority, even though they have like 120 seats still. So that was definitely not altruistic in terms of, like, in France. And it's already causing problem because the prime minister said that he will be resigning, and people say that the president refused his resignations because he really doesn't want to roll with the leader of the left-wing parties, which is, I think, the one person that he kind of considers like kind of erratic and not really agreeable. And it would endanger democracy. I'm not sure about that, but whatever. In the UK, I don't know. Like, I was under the impression that prime ministers still followed public vote of confidence more than in France, and that may have pushed them to do that. But there was already so many things that were feeling chaotic and out of control, and that pushed Rishi Sunak to push the election up, like, earlier. And there was also Reform UK, which is like an far right. Well, it's a populist right parties, but basically it's the same as far right. It's like the UK to British people and out with everybody else, or things like that. And they actually did like 14%. They won 40% in the election, but that only translates into 1% of the seats, because the bipartisan, even though it's an assembly parliament system, the bipartisan is really very present in the UK. And so basically the majority just wins almost everything. They had like a percentage of like I don't know, they had 34% of the votes, the Labour Party, and they have 63% of the seats. So yeah, I think, and the Conservative, they had like 24%. So I think maybe there was something that Grenville mentioned about like hoping that people would just re-elect them, like a vote of confidence, but it's actually turned against them. And because they knew that the Labour would win, otherwise, if they did not win, contrary to France, where there was really like a feeling that there was an attack on democracy, I feel like people were just like, okay, it's a gamble. Like we've always been in a bipartisan system. We're going to gamble that we're going to either win or lose, and then we'll come back into power eventually, and we'll still mitigate into the bills and laws from Parliament or something like that. But yeah, that's what I feel. The UK is kind of sometimes the intentions behind the elections in the UK I always find kind of muddy. It's always been like that, even when I was a kid. So I'm not certain what's the exact purpose of them. And I don't know if we'll ever know. Like I don't even know if I understand the decision to dissolve parliament in France. So I think sometimes like we can speculate the most like we can, and sometimes we just like don't necessarily understand like the personal reasons of people in them.
So I think partly to add to it is there has been significant dissatisfaction with the Conservative Party, where especially remember during COVID, a lot of the working class weren't able to actually do their normal trade, and a lot of foreigners were put into those roles to manage the more menial roles that the UK workers were not doing. And so there was a lot of dissatisfaction that there's a lot of foreign energy coming into the country, taking away jobs. There was a feeling of a lack of economic security, a lack of border security, a lack of national security. And that's really what the Labour Party's political manifesto was based on. So as you were chatting, I was just kind of trying to find something around what could have created the shift. So those are some of the things, but also there's a sentiment that the Labour Party will reconsider certain things related to Brexit while not re-entering the European Union. So, there's a lot of other things at play, because having a relationship with kind of like a more amicable relationship with the European Union might also mean that they are able to secure the jobs in their own country, because they then have relationships to send people back to their own countries to secure jobs for their people. So there's a lot of undercurrent stuff. So this is definitely not an altruistic thing. The fact is, they would whether they lost the election 2 months down the line or now, I have a sense that they would have lost the election regardless. And it's something we've been speaking about for years, literally, as economies started opening up after COVID. The primary thing that we spoke to was the great desire for greater stability. All our economies have suffered. All of our inflation rates have been ridiculous. The world economy hasn't recovered the way we thought it would as quickly as it needed to. So there's a lot of work that needs to probably be done across many countries at a national level to start securing their citizens again. And that's why I'm not surprised that they lost the election, because the working class or the greater working majority is gonna vote for somebody that says, I am going to do X, Y, and Z in terms of securing you.
Yes, the way that I feel, and I'm still trying to gain more clarity on the UK Parliament and how things are run. But as you guys were speaking, that you guys spoke about this for years now, of the turmoil and the undercurrent of what things are going on, I feel that definitely what has occurred is a major shift in UK that will allow its people to recognize that there is a shift going on. I think maintaining the old system of labor is kind of like clawing at what used to work and hoping that it continues to work like this. But if there's a shift that's going on right now and things are dissolving, I feel for the next couple of years, people will recognize that relying on the government for labor, for jobs and labor will not be as sustainable as it used to be before COVID. And whether there's foreigners or not, there is still a call of stability when it comes to the job force, your own stability on providing abundance. So I feel that these couple of years are going to be, we're all up spiraling upwards in positivity. So these couple of years are going to be a contrast for the UK to experience that there are shifts and it's time to let go of the old ways and to rediscover for yourself how we can have a sustainable foundation with God and how this can move forward to a more gentler approach. Because right now it feels like there's like a large contrast, and hopefully the people of UK can recognize that, there can be a gentler approach and there can be sustainability and more authenticity. Right now, I feel like we're still trying to claw at the old system and it's just crumbling before our eyes.
I think
So I almost don't feel like the system is crumbling. I feel like people, through their choice, are remaking the system. Because if I remember correctly, one of the things in the UK was that the cost of living was being pushed up because rent was being pushed up by landlords. Because one of the policies of the Labour Party was going to be to slow down all of those things so that the living working class are more comfortable. And the fact of the matter is, if we look at inflation and consider the cost of a basket of goods, where bags of living goods could have cost you significantly less, and you would have gotten more of it prior to COVID. Across many countries, that has shifted. So lots of people are saying something's got to give. And if you're not going to do it, I'm going to vote for somebody else that will.
I still think that a lot of countries are actually learning the lesson that Nadia was talking about, whether the systems are actually crumbling or not. There's just something about learning to choose from a place that feels good, not from a place of fear, and really, really, really actually pushing people to make a choice, I would say, because Brexit was kind of an absence of choice. There was some kind of absence of choice, and people were so upset about the consequences that it brought up. And then COVID, the management of the PMs, and not doing anything about them, and the crisis, and the many PMs that turned, even though it was very chaotic, it was kind of an absence of choice. People were like, okay, now I'm ready to choose, but they had to be kind of pushed to that decision. And I think, in a sense, like in France, the fact that the far right was a very clear menace for a lot of people for their daily lives, push them to choose and push them to go to the urns for the first time in 50 years for some, and actually exercise their choice. And so hopefully, even though like I don't know if it's going to change a whole lot for them, I don't know if it's going to magically reconstruct our societies and the things that people feel are destabilized or think we need help on. But hopefully, like that actually makes people learn that we are sovereign of our choices. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we can retain from this week in politics. Like, you have a choice, you need to exercise it. I think people understood more than ever the absolute power of going to vote, even though it was just one vote. I haven't seen something like that in probably ever, because like in 2002, there was already like the far right movement growing in France, and it was because of the absence of votes and the fear that followed afterwards that people got to vote. But right now it was very much like, oh, like regions that were completely far right, suddenly like when everyone votes, they're on the left side of a political spectrum. How weird, how surprising. And I think, yes, people are still kind of being pushed and brushed and kind of choosing to learn that lesson the hard way, but hopefully it's a lesson learned right now. And whoever is at the head of the state afterwards, like at least this lesson is learned for this generation of elections. And I feel there's something very similar happening in the US. I think there's something very similar happening everywhere, and it's a good thing for France and the UK that they didn't go to the extreme solution in order to learn the lesson before they exercised their choice. Um, they exercised it before, even though it was still like a little bit rushed. And that's when it felt like it was like rushed elections, like not being ready, feel fear and panic. But I mean, if that's the lesson for people right now, then so be it.
Yes, I agree with you. I think there's been I mean, even with the South African election, we've seen that the choices that people are making are people are probably honoring their choices more, which has, in our country specifically, actually necessitated a government of unity. There's a desire to move forward together. And so no party received an outright majority, and the resulting factor was that a parliament couldn't be formed unless they went into coalition. And the results of picking some of those ministerial portfolios and distributing it amongst the parties to this government of national unity has been very interesting, because yes, there's vying for power, but the fact is there is a forced sharing of power due to the vote of the South African people.
Any other insights that you guys want to share, or feelings about what's happening in the UK and France?
I think it's a beautiful unfolding. Like, it may seem a bit like rash at the moment, but I do feel that, you know, not being from the UK, I've known of the UK that it's a very much traditionalist, and it really likes to hold down on its traditions. And now we see this unfolding of change while also like keeping their traditions that they like and are going to make them their unique selves. So I feel that this is a beautiful unfolding. It may not, of course, look like how we would imagine it to be, but of course, that is the divine way. Like only God knows how it's meant to unfold in the most efficient way.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I was feeling like um with the UK elections, it's kind of just like there's more just like a feeling that people voted more so to just like say no or express disagreement with the decisions that the Conservative Party has done, basically, that has made, like in the UK. Like it was more just of saying no to that, but it wasn't so much saying yes to the Labour Party. I know one thing that I didn't know is that I think it was saying that like for the last 120 years, the Conservative Party has been in power for like the vast majority of the time in the United Kingdom, which is crazy to think about because I don't know, I just had never looked into that before. And usually in the US, the overall feeling or the thing that people say is they're like Europe, which when they say that they're only talking about Western Europe, is like way more liberal, than the US. And so, but so it would fly under the radar. People wouldn't know that like the Conservative Party has been in power most of the time, throughout the existence of the Conservative Party, So I thought that was interesting, but it's like, yeah, so it seems like this election is more so just like a swinging of the pendulum, like toward the other major party because we're not happy with some of the decisions that this current party has gotten. And it's just kind of like completely like it's just how the world works versus like how the divine works, where like the world is kind of just like it's always gonna be volatile and go between different things because what is really needed is like a choice of love and not just kind of like trying to grasp at something, on the outside to try to like solve your problems, basically. So, but we'll see. And maybe this is like how people's consciousness overall changes because as we go through these experiences of like back and forth and this kind of like instability, more and more people are like, oh, I want to search for the thing that is stable, which is like love, and I'm gonna choose that. And like overall, like consciousness kind of like progresses. But like in the meantime, there's like just a lot of like this kind of thing going on. And I was feeling like the French elections were kind of maybe like that too. I wasn't sure why Macron would call the elections after the far right won a lot in the European Parliament elections because I was like, ooh, like that's risky, like if you don't want the far right to be in power to be like, oh, well, they just won in our country, so let's have an election and have them either come on in or be rejected by the people. But I guess it kind of makes sense, and it almost seems like that tactic was used to kind of create an impetus for people to go out and vote against the far right because they're like, oh my gosh, like this could actually happen. And like, I think for a lot of people in France and a lot of countries, there's like, oh my God, like if the far right actually gets into power, like they have this feeling that they're like, ooh, that really wouldn't be good. So that kind of shock of being like, oh my gosh, it could happen was more like, again, like what was driving the outcome, I don't know. So plus it was also kind of like, I know that there were a lot of cases where in the second round of the elections, there were like, so there would be like three different parties, like far right, and then two other ones that were more left. And then one of them would drop, one of the more left ones would drop out. So it was just a choice between the far right and like one of the other more moderate ones. And so it was like strategic. So it was like, of course, the more moderate one is going to win now, because it's not split between three parties, it's just one or the other. And then what are you going to choose, right? And so it kind of, that's another thing that I saw there. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's interesting to hear. I feel like I can't say that there is any election right now in the world, or maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe, Mexico was an election for somebody instead of against somebody. But I think like most elections right now in the world are just against somebody. And we gotta accept that that's where people are at, and that's not necessarily like a conscious choice. So there's still kind of that energy of like the absence of choice. But also there's still like a push to make a choice. And saying like this is not what I want for my country is still a choice, basically. Even though that's not like the best course of action for how to manage a country, that is still a choice, and that is what we have right now, and I guess for now that is good enough. That's kind of funny, how you say that Western Europe is like more liberal, so people wouldn't necessarily even think that the conservatives are in power. I think it's mostly because there is much less religious morals and ethics into politics. And it's more about not ideologies, but actually like how the economics of a country are being managed. And even though like there is a lot of like social bills in order to help in European countries, like there's still like um a little bit of that conservative way of managing the economy, and maybe some of that immigration laws as well, so it's different, but it's also very close. And also that's just how countries are. There's just this thing where two big parties are like two sides of the same coin, and they just balance out. The way the system is done is that they balance each other out. Um, Not to say that is perfect, but I think your analysis of this was very complete, and also at the same time, like there's just this feeling of like, hey, that's where our country is at. Like we gotta accept that and play with it, and yeah, that's just it.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for that. I agree. Isn't that interesting? It's such a pattern that it's not so much voting for something, but it's more just voting against something. Because it's just like, well, I've seen what this does, so I'm going to say no to that. And then here's my other option, so I guess I'm saying yes to this. So cool. And I think that, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's just a process of learning, of being, because when you think about it, right, like the divine way, like the path of love, like the path of love is kind of just like you're allowed to learn, and you're allowed to go through what you need to go through, but ultimately, like, love is love. And so it's kind of this like, it's this path, and you're gonna need to find love wherever it is, and whether you can pick it out from this party has a few like loving positions, and then the rest maybe not so much. And this party has some, and so you grab those or this kind of thing, or you're just like, but it's not, maybe it's like no one party is completely embodying that, but it's kind of like they each have a little piece. And so we're all we're working toward all of the pieces of love being implemented in our own lives and therefore in the world. But until then, it's kind of just like you get like a little sampling of the divine and then a lot of other like garbage. And then you get this different sampling and then some other garbage. And then you start to then you start to agree, like, you know what, this one piece right here, everybody agrees. Like, no, we're just gonna be like, you know what, we need, like in the US, like we need some social safety net. Okay, everyone agrees on it. Okay, cool. That's compassion. All right, cool. We all agree. Like, and that's just kind of how stuff moves. Anyway, sorry, that's all. That's what I was feeling.
So interestingly, as you were talking, like just because the other day I was looking at the significance of the number 8, and we are in the number 8 year. And so I just went and read up a little bit. And so it says that in angelic symbolism, the number 8 is a representation of justice, leadership, prosperity, balance, but it also represents karma. So you are able to access all the fruits of your labor fairly easily. So it's kind of that reaping what you've sown kind of energy. And so like when we put it into perspective of a nation being a complex individual, we start to see that the nation is saying, I want to rebalance my system. And so things that haven't been working need to, and it's literally what you were speaking to, Sage, in that theme of, well, this didn't work so well, so let's go pull from that part that does work and shift a little bit in that direction and rebalance the system. But it's also that greater desire for stronger leadership. And we spoke to it at the beginning of this year, saying there's like almost 70 countries going through elections in this year. So there are definitely going to be shifts. And we are clearly seeing some interesting shifts as a result of all these, so far, as a result of all the elections that we've observed thus far.
I'm also seeing alongside what you guys are saying, there's like a drive for providing for yourself, like, which is very loving, that you don't care what party you're voting for as long as you know that you're able to provide for yourself and your family. And that in itself shows that, people are choosing the most loving for themselves. They need to survive. If you're in survival mode, you will continue to, do what's best so that you can survive. And I take that example with similar what's happening in Canada with people that are living in very high wages and not being able to be provided for what they thought Trudeau would provide economically. And they, Trudeau was a poster boy, and he was very much going to save them and create a very happy liberal Canada state. And then to almost overnight Toronto voting for the left side, it shows that people really want stability, economic stability, regardless if it's going to be the left side or the right side. They want someone that will take care of them economically.
Yeah, that's good that you're bringing this up. They actually vote. So Trudeau is liberal. He's in the most liberal party, and people actually voted for the very conservative party. Well, Trudeau has been in power for not 10 years, but a while now. And I think people are just manifesting their upsets as well. Like it's very hard to do basic grocery shopping right now in Canada because prices are so high, and some commodities have become luxuries for some people, and so on and so forth. And I think people are just, I think it's a normal way of doing things. People are just happy to be more liberal when economically it's going good, and more conservative when it's just like, not going good. And I think there's something okay with it, because we haven't necessarily learned how to have a stable economical foundation yet, and that's okay because I don't think anyone has learned how to have an stable economical foundation in a system where it's regulated with stock market and inflation, and we're just learning. And but there's something about like the way people use it afterwards. So like the conservative leader that won the election in Toronto called for a national election because of the shocking results, saying like Trudeau can't go on like this. The real meaning was like, all right, like let's get into power. But it's true that some people say that Trudeau can't go on like this. So there are all there are so many different reasons why people would vote for other people. It's like the leader can go on like this, or all right, like I've tested that, I say no, like I want to say yes to something else, I want something different, or like this has never been my political opinion, so I want to vote for someone else, or he didn't keep his promise, so I want to vote for someone else. There are so many possibilities on an election, and I think that's okay. I think yes, people are hoping that they could get the best of all the parties, hopefully. I think some people actually quite like the polarization of the elections, sadly, and the drama that comes with it, and don't understand that, it's not just all black and white. Um, and then there is us, hopefully, offering that through um, choosing the best feeling, the good feeling, the right path for yourself. You also create the right path for your system, your country, your region. And hopefully that bleeds into politics more and more. The more people understand that, the more people claim their power and claim their voice. And yeah, I think what we can hope for is a less passive way of participating and doing your duty in politics by voting, in a more not offensive way, but like, not going into the offense. Like, why am I thinking about football right now? I guess it's because it's the Euro 2024, I think. But it's like going on the offensive, not by attacking people, but by really understanding that your choice, your responsibility, your voice, your power is important. So claiming your power, representing people through your power, understanding that you cannot wait for someone to represent you, you must represent yourself. And that doesn't mean being in politics, but just being a voice for people. Um, Claiming your economic power, claiming your your romantic power, I don't know, claiming your social power, claiming your influence, claiming your purpose, your legacy, the things that you want to bring to people, really. And sometimes what you bring to people is like, oh my gosh, this couple is so beautiful, so romantic, I want the same. And then you use that voice in order to say to people, hey, you can have that power for yourself, you can have that romance for yourself, you can also use it to have a life that you desire, and you can also use it to change um, the way you view your system, your local system. And so, yeah, hopefully, like people understand more and more what that feels like, what that looks like, and claim it for themselves. And that's why discussions like that are important.
Yeah, and what you were saying, I wanted to share a story on that because it's something that I've learned. When I lived in Miami, there was a um, shortstop cook where he was like 24/7 diner cook. And it was the second election for Trump. And he is a mixed family. His wife is of a different race and his daughter is mixed. So he was so worried about the economy falling in Biden's hand that even though his wife and his daughter was going to vote for Biden, he was ready to vote for Trump, even though he knew that Trump was a racist, because we already had an experience with him in the first election. He was more worried about the economy and had more confidence in how Trump will deal with the economy as a businessman than anything else. So it was a question of how much is your peace worth? And I see in this journey that the more self love we give ourselves, the more we recognize that our peace is priceless. We cannot compromise it. Whereas a lot of people haven't come to that state yet to recognize their priorities in peace compared to giving their power away to seemingly fearful situations. And yeah, wanted to share that experience.
Yeah. Any last words?
Who are you talking about, Nadia? Who's making that decision between Trump and
He was one of the deli cooks that I used to go to and like grab
Oh,
sandwiches. Yeah, and
okay,
he was
got
going
it.
under health issues, a lot of economic issues. And regardless of how his family felt about voting for Trump and knowing that Trump was discriminating, he thought that this is the best way for him to go forward and provide for his family. And now we know that peace is worth everything. You know, we cannot put a price on it, but it has to come with a level of self-love to recognize that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I didn't hear it at first, so that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting to know how the working class kind of votes for extreme leaders or extreme groups because of this economic fear, basically. And I think we should definitely go deeper with that in the future. That is all the time we have for today. So I want to thank you guys for this discussion. I want to thank everyone that watched this live and watched this replay on YouTube. And if you enjoy these types of discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share so that we can do more of them. And also, share with us what you would like to talk about in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for following us and see you next week. Bye-bye.